Peace and love, y'all. It's your brother A.D.V.I.S.S, and we are here with another installment of more interviews, aka memoirs of our real experiences. And for today's more interviews, we have the creator, educator, and just all around wise and dope individual by the name of Kundan Chhabra. So, and appreciate y'all coming through. So again, we're gonna have Kundan Chhabra for today's more interviews. So as Kundan makes their way to the live, y'all, if y'all have any questions that y'all want to share with Kundan, please put them down in the comments, as well as if there's more things that you want to know, please add them as well. Because again, this is not just only an interview of me interviewing the artist, creator, and everyone that is there. This is also your time to learn more about the creator as well. So with that, before I bring Kundan in, let me go ahead, and I got the small bio behind us. So thank you for being in here, Kundan, and thank you for your time for today. So Kundan Chhabra is the creator of the Justice Balanced Holistic Time Management Methodology, consulting and coaching journey to help inclusive creators, leaders, become more confident, clear, and secure with strong, stable boundaries without walls. Kundan is also an indigenous Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh, if I'm saying that right, Sheik, you could say, get me on that, non-binary, gender fluid, multi-creative storyteller, poet who weaves new story spells to flip oppressive narratives and break the curse of systematic oppression. They grew up in Myanmar, formerly Burma, in Southeast Asia. Pronouns, they/them, not he or him. Major upcoming projects include, and we're going to be talking that, the launch of Storytelling for a Cause, which is a series of online courses, the first one being for climate justice. And with that, y'all, I'm going to go ahead into, if I can right now, bring in Kundan Chhabra.
Hello.
What's going on? Good to see
What's up?
you.
What's up? Let me
It's
put on my
finally
hat.
here. It's finally
Yeah.
here. Thank you so much for joining and giving the time to be a part of a more
Yeah.
interviews series, because
hmm
it's well worth it. So again, if you all do not know who this is Kundan Chhabra, and you've probably seen their face multiple times on any of the content if you've seen my content, and you just know how informative they are when it comes to the information that they share, the books, the wisdom, the knowledge, all that's said here. So now we're here
Yeah.
interviewing them so we can get further in depth a little bit more on
hmm
who they are and all of the great content work that they do. So with that, is there anything, Kunin, that you would like to share with folks before we start, as well as if there are any questions or concerns?
Yeah. The major thing, the main thing is that the one in the first paragraph, right? Justice-based holistic time management. And it took me a long time to come up with that framework and that model and methodology, right?
Mm,
And it's interesting because part of it was me trying to find my, so-called niche or niche in marketing terms. Um, but also it was also about, clarity for my clients, to see, like, to help them see clearly what they're dealing with,
mm-hmm.
and also help myself see what I'm dealing with as well, because we have similar issues, right, facing us, especially as racialized people and colonized people, which we can get more into. But yeah, like when
Yes.
I finally explained the diagram yesterday
Mm-hmm.
and see how they're all interconnected, and because they're all interconnected, you can actually start anywhere from the 3 points and get to the other two, and so it's like really, really cool.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Thank you. And yes, there's gonna be more, y'all. So again,
yeah.
if y'all have any questions as well, please throw them down in the comments. Because throughout the
Hmm.
interview, I will have my own questions. But if y'all are curious to also know some more from Kundan, please throw them down in the comments. As well as, don't you, or you also have your website, or are you still working on that as of right now?
Yeah, the website I launched for the Story for a Cause, right, eventually I might get storyforacause.com itself, maybe. Right now is bestmessage.com with a triple S instead of double S. I couldn't get the double S one. Somebody else
Mm,
took it. Somebody else owns it since 2007, so I got the one with the three. Um,
S's.
and yeah,
Okay.
bestmessage.com. But I also own, messaging.blog, messaging.live. I
Mm,
have it all. Like, yeah,
okay. And
yeah,
again, if y'all do
yeah.
not know, if you're here on Instagram, you can click up on here and go and follow and support, and you'll see all of
Yeah.
the content that Kundan does have, and you'll get all the links to everything else, whether if it's YouTube or wherever else you need to end up going. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
with that,
Exactly. Yeah.
is there any other concerns or anything that you want to share before we start?
Yeah. So when you go to my profile, the link you will see there is my Patreon, right? And of course, you're welcome to join that. And that one's just to support the content I already create. So the way I use Patreon is kind of different from others. Like I don't see the point in creating additional content for my Patreon, especially since what I'm charging is not even minimum wage, right?
Mm,
Like you can join for as little as $6 a month, which is really nothing, right? So especially as a solo creator, I'm not a corporation, right? Like
yeah.
me charging $6 per month is different from Disney Plus charging $6 per month, you know.
Mm,
So and you get nothing extra. Like it's to support the free content that I already create across social media, like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. So up to like $28 per month, I provide nothing extra. But at $54 per month, that's when you start getting some rewards, in
mm,
addition to what you already get from social media. That's how I frame that. And then on my bio, you'll see two additional pages that I created. The Clear Focus 7
yeah.
is for the things related to clarity and focus, which is part of the justice-based holistic time management because the model is wholeness leads to clarity, clarity leads to boundaries, and then boundaries leads back to wholeness, and etc. It's a circle, right? A cycle. And
Mm,
then you see a second page, Story for a Cause, which is where I've already posted about two or three posts related to educating people about how to tell good stories
yes.
in order to fight for causes that you want.
Mm, there it is, y'all.
Mhm.
And so, with that, did you have any concerns?
Concerns?
Yeah.
No, no,
All right.
no,
Perfect. With
no.
that, y'all, we're gonna get this interview on the way and started. So, I
Okay.
mean, the first thing before I even ask the first question is, how are you doing today? How's things been?
Well, I don't know if I told you this. I had and this can even be part of the interview because I learned quite a bit about the way systems interplay with individual behavior from this experience. So
Mm,
I had a great day on Saturday with the Holi celebration, the Hindu and all. It was a wonderful
mm,
day. But then in the evening, I took a short walk to the park when this random Labrador, possibly a dog, jumped at me and bit my palm. And you can see it here,
oh, wow.
right? Yeah. And so there was no bleeding, thank God. It's just kind of more like an abrasion.
Yeah.
But it still hurts if I squeeze my palm.
Mm-hmm.
And and the guy was at first he expressed concern, but then at one point, probably because of the shock, I mean, I'm almost
Mm,
41. I've never been bit by a dog. So I almost fainted, right? And so that's when the guy basically pretended to be angry and was like, "Oh, now you're just creating drama, blah blah blah. You look ridiculous like this," and he started walking away.
mm,
And then he said something else that I misheard as saying, "Come with me," like to his house or something. Uh, but what he actually said was, "Call the cops if you want," which I didn't realize. So I followed him like quite a bit. It seems like he lives in the same apartment complex. Um, But at some point he stopped and turned around and said, "Why are you following me?" And, you know, and I was so stressed. The correct answer should have been because your dog bit me. But instead I said, "Well, did you say, ask me to follow you?" And he was like, "No, I said, call the cops if you want." And I didn't even have my phone on me, so I couldn't do that.
mm.
But even if I did, I don't feel like involving the cops in most situations.
Yeah.
Uh, for many reasons, like, including not really believing in this criminal punishment system, etc. But it really made me think about, which is part of this holistic time management justice-based thing, right?
Hmm.
Of course, he's still accountable for his behavior as an individual, like.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse for that. But I also wondered about how, because at some point he said, you're just making stuff up because you want money. And
Mm,
I didn't even realize the laws regarding this until I looked it up later that apparently if you get bit by a dog, both the owner and you are supposed to call the cops, etc. Uh, and that the owner is supposed to pay for it, especially with the insurance, the billing after you see the dog, the owner is supposed to be sent the bills, etc. I didn't know any of that at the time, right?
mm.
So now I understand his behavior in a way like the system makes him more afraid of liability and legal consequences rather than seeing me as a human being
Yeah.
because he didn't even look at my wound properly, you know.
Mm,
And so between fear and anger, especially for men or masculine presenting people, right? Between fear and anger, partly because there's so much demonization of other emotions, like anger is the only emotion allowed for men to feel, right?
mm.
That's partly it. But also, even in general, between fear and anger, some people tend to lean onto anger because fear is a more uncomfortable emotion to feel.
Yeah.
But also, there's a weaponization of the anger, right? Because it's a reverse victimhood type of anger, not a real anger, where now he's turning me into the bully, someone who's manipulating him out of money when I wasn't even thinking about that. Because when he asked me at first, "What do you want?" I literally said, "I don't know," because I didn't really know what to do in that situation,
Yeah.
right? But anyways, I bring it up because the next morning I did go to the doctor to get a tetanus shot. But one of the side effects that, again, I didn't know is now my right arm is kind of,
Numb.
there's a muscle pain where if I move
Mm,
around a bit, I feel the pain. And I called the doctor this morning and I was like, "Wait a minute, is this normal?" And they're like, "Yes, it's normal for a few days for a tetanus shot because it's not just tetanus, it's like two other bacteria that is included in the shot as well."
mm.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
What weekend, or I like to call it a
yeah.
strengthening. My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that you are at least have gotten that tended to and that
Mm-hmm.
you are here and are still present. So, and
Yeah,
you learned from the situation as well too. So there was also lessons to be learned from it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all never know. See, life is just chock full of experiences and situations you never know could happen. You can be on your up and then out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
a straight situation can bring you down from that up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those who do not know you and this is their first time experiencing you and have no particular clue, I read a bit, of course, from the bio, but in this particular case, from your own words, Tell us about
Mm.
yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I'm from Burma, right? Which is in Southeast Asia, for those who don't know, right? Uh, by the way, I'm really lucky and blessed that in college, I'm a college dropout, by the way. I dropped out after a year because of money issues, right? I couldn't pay
Mm,
for it. But during that year, there was an Indian professor who really fought with the college to teach economic geography because he felt that UCNs, right, or Americans, I prefer calling them UCNs,
mm,
uh, don't really have a good knowledge of geography. And he fought with the college to like, insist that he wanted to teach a course, accredited course on economic geography as part of general credits,
yes.
which I happened to take, which is why I know where certain African countries are, I know where Ukraine is. Some people probably don't even know where Ukraine is right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Burma is in Southeast Asia, and it's between India and Bangladesh.
Okay.
And it also borders, I believe, China and Thailand and Laos a little bit. And in fact, Shan State, one of the states,
Mm,
borders with Thailand, which is why there's a very similar food and similar cultures. But yeah, it's been going through 1 year of a military coup right now,
mm,
and it's been off and on for the last 7 decades, 6 decades, in some form of military dictatorship, and that also has institutional colorism,
yes.
especially against us darker skinned Hindus and also Muslims. And they don't discriminate because it's more about the colorism than the religion.
Yeah.
And so they, yeah, like before I was born in 1981, they kicked out a lot of Indians because it was a xenophobic government
Mm,
that took power. And I use the term xenophobic on purpose because xenophobia and racism are two very different things.
yeah.
Again, racism is very specific, and xenophobia, again, has no discrimination. It's just anti everyone else, right? That's xenophobia. And, and so they kicked out a lot of us, and we were forced to, I mean, not me, but my parents and grandparents, because I wasn't even born at the time,
Mm,
they're, they were forced to get FRC identification cards, meaning foreigner resident cards, basically.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, so they were foreigners, and so even those who remained there, because it was also very Marxist and socialist,
Yes.
they seized the assets and businesses of all the foreigners. And so, yeah, my grandfather's assets and businesses, etc., were seized and stuff like that. And the Indian government at the time did offer citizenship. My nana from my mom's side wanted to leave, and my nanny, my grandmother from my mother's side,
Mm,
wanted to stay. And she was like, "Yeah, you can take your sons, just leave me with my daughters." And my grandpa was like, "No, like I'm not splitting my family. I'm staying then." So they stayed despite the oppression. So I was a legacy of that on my mom's side. And on
mm,
my dad's side, my dad was born in India and was in India until age 10.
yeah.
And then the partition happened between India and Pakistan because of the mob, the murder of so many Hindus by Muslims at the time, all of those chaos, they were forced to flee. And they didn't really have a home in India, so they fled all the way to Burma, where I think they had a home in Mon, one of the cities in Burma,
Yes.
where they settled. So from the age of 10, my dad grew up in Burma, whereas my mom was born and brought up in Burma. And then I was born Burma in 1981.
Mm.
And again, due to the colorism, etc., I even wrote a poem about this where the nurse. Now I feel like that it was like a criminal negligence rather than just a regular accident because
Hmm.
the nurse I was born feet first, and the nurse just wasn't careful and twisted my feet, was twisted my feet as well as I believe my spine.
Mm.
So I had to have two operations to fix it, but that stunted my growth because even though I have three older brothers, two of whom are like 6 feet tall, and my dad's kind of tall too. Uh, I'm like 4'11" or 5, something like that, right? It stunted my growth.
Mm.
I couldn't wear slippers until I was 13 because there were some missing nerves on my left foot.
Mm.
And so my even my left foot and my right foot is not the same size. And the whole time in Burma, my parents would make sure all of my shoes were tailor made,
Mm.
as well as my pants actually, but especially my shoes. I didn't have the same opportunity here in the United States because tailor made stuff are super expensive over here,
Yeah.
you know. So finding the right shoes has been a 20-year struggle for me, where I found the right shoes only once. Uh, and somebody that I live with accidentally threw it away, and I haven't found it done since.
Wow.
So, yep, that's a whole thing. Just walking is a whole thing for me, right?
Mm.
So I grew up with that level of oppression on many levels, but simultaneously, I was lucky again. I use lucky with codes because I was
Mm.
also bullied because of that context. Because my dad, my parents somehow got me into a school for the children of diplomats. And I was the only person who wasn't a child of a diplomat. My dad was an airline pilot, right?
Mm.
Add to that the colorism and all of that, so I was bullied often, right, because of that. Uh, and so it's like, but I grew up with the children of ambassadors and even intelligence officers, uh, military personnel, including perhaps even a CIA agent, right? So
Wow.
because of that, I saw things from both sides of power, both from being totally oppressed, but also the oppressor's side.
Hmm.
And you cannot read that in a book. I grew up with that. So that's why I created, justice-based, holistic time management, right? Because I have that unique perspective of, I do have the book learning too, because I needed to see things from a higher level. So I did read books
Yes.
in order to confirm and validate my experiences. But I have more than that, because of all that.
Mm.
And also because when I moved here, I got disconnected from my Hindu culture because I started being too influenced by New Ageism, colonial spirituality, all of that. And I really had to like fight against that as well,
Hmm.
including experiencing covert racism that I didn't even realize was racism, especially after my,
Hmm.
now I see it as sexual assault. At the time, I didn't even know that was what had happened.
Yeah.
So again, the things that happen to you because you don't know and because you've been gaslit into not knowing even when you do know, when you start to know.
Yes.
There's so many levels to this. That's why also I created, justice-based holistic time management, because the gaslighting is so intense that even when we're being constantly boundary violated, we don't realize it, and that's constantly disconnecting us from the wholeness and the clarity that comes from wholeness.
Mm.
Yeah,
Which we gonna touch on later, y'all. So there's
yeah,
there's a lot to be said about that, but
hmm,
I appreciate that sharing and giving the more background. I'm glad
hmm,
I got to do this so I could get to know a little bit more.
hmm,
Uh, with that, to follow it up, I know with all the hardships and the struggles in the
hmm,
beginning of your life and just figuring a way through all of that. I want to know when did you begin creating content and poetry from all of that going on?
Yeah, so it started with the New Ageism thing, right? I at first I started reading books like Conversations with God, The Future of Love, and eventually that led me to A Course in Miracles, and then I didn't want to read these books on my own, so I started looking up, at first, like book clubs, basically, right? Book study groups
Yeah.
that might exist. And I found the Church of Religious Science, and now they've changed their name to Centers for Spirituality because they didn't want to be confused with Scientology, uh, which is a whole other thing. Uh,
Mm,
but at first, I went to that church all the way in Huntington Beach, even though it took me like a 2 hour bus ride. I would like at least 90-minute bus ride, I think. And back and forth, it would be like 3 hours. I would go there. And then eventually found a more local church here at the Unity Church, which is New Thought Church.
hmm.
They're both New Thought churches, actually, you know, going all the way back to uh, Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Transcendentalists and
Yeah.
Theosophy and all that. And I was part of the Theosophical Society in Burma as well, so that's why I was kind of a little bit uh, kind of comfortable, right, with joining first the Huntington Beach Church of Religious Science and eventually Unity. I never really officially joined them, like never became like a card-carrying member, but
Yeah.
but I went to their Sunday services so often uh, and went to so many of their classes. But it started with, joining their book clubs, like the Conversations with God and A Course in Miracles and things like that.
Hmm.
But I started noticing how much they demonize anger and emotions in general, but especially anger. And it was only more recently that I saw the connection with racism. But at the time, just that alone, just the fact that they were demonizing anger was so off that I created at first my model of the 3 types of anger, which eventually became 4 types of anger and now 5 types of anger. But
Yes.
I wrote an article in 2015 called Why Anger is Good for You, 3 Types of Anger, that was published in Elephant Journal. And I think
Mm.
at this point, probably 6,000 people have read it, I think. Uh, but it's gone like semi-viral, that article. But that was what started on my journey. And then a
Mm.
few years after that, I woke up to the 4th type of anger when I realized that the way I was treated after my assault was racist, you know. Uh,
Hmm.
so, yeah, I think it's a good segue to talk about that. So, when I was part of A Course in Miracles, which at the time I didn't realize, by the way, they're one of the co-writers or co-authors of A Course in Miracles was also one of this was before he wrote A Course in Miracles, but still,
Okay.
it matters, right? It matters that before all that, he was the co-director of the CIA's
Yeah.
MK Ultra mind control program.
Mm.
So some people argue and said, oh, it was before that, but it still matters. That context matters that he was part of this, right? And I bring all this up because in context of what happened to me, now I get it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so in one of these book study groups, when I was in the bathroom, this white guy um, started basically like masturbating in front of me,
Mm.
took his penis off and started jacking off, and then even turned around and did it in front of me. And then I was kind of uncomfortable, but I was so shocked I didn't know what to say. Similar to the dog incident, right? There's parallels.
Yeah.
Um, and then he asked me, like, do you like it? I was like, I don't know. Like, and then he was like, do you want me to leave? I was like, yeah, yes, I want you to leave. So he left, but then he came back and did it again. And then he left finally. So I didn't go for like a week or two, right? And then
Yeah.
I called the facilitator, who was a white woman, and she expressed empathy and said she would uh, talk about it uh, with this person, give him a good talk. Uh, which, by the way, itself is a huge red flag that I didn't even realize until I talked to two women friends of mine.
Yeah.
They were like, wait a minute, she should have called the cops and made a police report and not talk to the guy,
Yeah.
which itself was red flag number one, right? Red flag number two. So she asked me to come back. So I came back, right? And in the middle of some sort of break, she suddenly, and I think, oh, the guy went out of the room, right? She said, oh, actually, it wasn't even a break. It was like in the middle of the discussion. She suddenly, like, I'll come back. And she, like, got up and walked out and followed him and then came back. So I talked to her and I said, so, like, what happened? She said, yeah, I told him that's, completely unacceptable.
Yes.
And so I was like, what did he say? He said he just laughed it off and said it was just a joke. So I was like, I didn't say anything, but the way my face was,
Yeah.
she knew I didn't like this response. And that's when she said the thing that at the time I didn't even realize was, at the very least, very weird and off statement, but it's actually when you understand the power dynamics of what has happened, it was a racist thing for her to say.
Mm.
She said, these types of people need this more than you do.
Mm-mm.
And I'm like, if I was a white woman or even a white man, she would not have said it. Or if the guy was a black man, she would not have said that.
Yeah.
There's clear racism, racist bias involved in that statement. And then there's also the spiritual influence of a book like Course in Miracles, where I get it on that level where she's like, oh, these people are hurt or whatever, or need healing or whatever. That's why they're hurting others. Which is why, by the way, I question statements like hurt people hurt others.
Mm.
It can be true in some contexts, but it can also be weaponized the way she weaponized it
Yeah.
to coddle and enable abusers like that.
Yes.
Meaning, oh, I'm the perfect victim, right? I'm already a good person because I don't do these things, whereas he needs it more because he does it, which is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's, but waking up to that after I came up with the three types of anger, the fourth type, by the way, is when you wake up to the connection, the interplay between the way you repress yourself and systemic oppression, the way you allow yourself to be gaslit, or you don't question the gaslighting because it's so intense that you literally uh, almost act like spokespeople for
Mm.
that level. But similar to respectability politics, right?
Yes.
How people do that, uh, or saying we should all be civil when we talk about racism, right? Or peaceful.
Yes.
When you wake up to how oppressive that is and the anger that happens, like one day I woke up to that after reading an article about the connection between the far right and how the far right actually influences New Ageism, even though it's mostly practiced by people who leftists or practice being liberal. When I saw the connection
Mm.
between the two, I remembered what had happened, right? In the anger that was, uh, and then I remembered what had happened, and that's when I woke up to the anger, right? That level of anger.
Yes.
I literally had this shot of energy all over my body that I went to the park and I started like um, punching the grass. And then when I came back home, I was punching the pillow and screaming into the pillow and crying, right? But you have to feel that to really wake up out of the oppression. And I feel
Mm.
like when you wake up to that, that's when, like, even in terms of so-called personal success, you're more likely to have it, because it's almost like taking back your power through that anger. So contrary to what the spiritual people say,
Yeah.
that kind of anger doesn't diminish you, but actually it's a rocket ship, it's a way to reclaim your power.
Mm,
Because it's passion on the other side of it.
yeah. And this is all stemming from why now Kundan
Mm-hmm.
creates what Kundan creates. Um,
Yeah.
man, and you were touching on so many things on some of these questions that shoot, I don't even it's like now me segueing to give you a little bit more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I'm gonna say this on top of all of the articles that you've written and
Mm-hmm.
the other content that you've put together. Um, what inspired you? Because how I got to really know you, besides the information you put out, I got to know you through the poetry lens, through that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, what inspired you and pushed you to create poetry in the midst of all of this?
I mean, I've been writing poems since I was a teen, but a lot
Mm,
of it was just, especially because later on too, like when I was in my teens, it was just, just very surface level flowery poetry. And then in my 20s, it was because I was influenced by New Ageism, aka colonial spirituality. It was very, still kind of surface level, but in a different way. It was, it's not the deep type of poetry that I've been writing the last 3 or 4 years, the deeper ones. That one started when I started studying the psychology and neuroscience of storytelling, and I started noticing how, how you say words are spells, and I say stories are spells
mm-hmm.
too. They're even more powerful spells, but they're a bunch of words put together, right?
Yes.
And also because when I studied the neuroscience, I discovered that stories are not how we escape reality, but how we navigate reality. It's literally how we think, how we process things. And because I understood that, I feel like I wanted to become a story activist in a way. And so I started writing more so short stories to combat systemic oppression, like my anti-gaslighting story, The Squirrel, the Snake, and the Seahorse, right?
Mm,
And then when I combined that later on with the poetic form, right, it became a whole new type of form. So that's how the poetry in recent years happened, where, like my latest poem is called Mythologize, right?
mm,
And even though it took me only a few minutes to, like the actual act of writing is just a few minutes for me often, right?
yes.
But there's a whole, like many years of context before that, right?
Yes.
Because like I told you before, like, it's not just that they don't even see us as human, meaning a lot of these Euro colonizers, as well as the other type of colonizers from over Saudi Arabia and Dubai. Uh, they're also colonizers of in a different way in a different region, right? It's and they all think the same way, do the same way of operating.
Yeah.
This idea of reverse victimhood, but also like it's not just that they don't see us as human, they don't even see us as alive, right?
Mm,
They see us as already dead.
like a virus.
Yeah, I use a different metaphor in my poem, but yeah. And so reclaiming my aliveness, right? Not just my pleasure, but my aliveness. And I woke up to that when I read The Freedom Artist 2 years ago, right? When by Ben Hogan. That's why I even started a book journey, a paid book journey, where I brought on 5 racialized people over a 3 or 4 month period, like a slow reading journey. So I read it twice. I ended up reading it twice. But the first time I read it, it made such a big impact on me because the catalyst that was a climax to the story, right?
Mm,
Was an upside down being. And that's when I realized, oh my God, like I'm not actually upside down. This is the system that's upside down. So for
yes.
me to reclaim my wholeness, my aliveness, I need to defiantly embrace my own upside downness for me to be right side up. That's when I started doing the pleasure dances that you
Yes.
see on my reel, so that I did pretty much the whole of last year, like every week, right? Every Monday. So that is also part of my poetry now, right? And so I was doing all of that
Hmm.
research plus the living of it for like 2 or 3 years before this new poem, this latest poem, right? Or one of my two latest poems, Mythologize, came into being, right?
Hmm.
So that's how the poetry works for me, where even though the actual writing is just a few minutes, in reality, in a way, it took many years of context before that. And now even that's become part of my process of creativity, because I always say that there are two ways of creativity, right? And I learned that from my one of my teachers at Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. One way is to make it happen, right? You write a question,
Yeah.
right? You watch a few videos, you write down a question, and then you just take a walk and you just leave it. And it might take you a few hours, a few days, even sometimes, or a few weeks.
Yeah.
And then when you come back, the words flow immediately within a few minutes. That's like I call it manual activation, but there's also spontaneous activation, the way that poem happened, right?
Mm.
Where you tap into your belly, where the maturity, I call it your maturity zone, right?
Yeah.
You tap into that and you find out what's ready to be expressed. That's like powerful and positive, right?
Hmm.
That just needs a little push, right? And then you just express that. That's how I write poems that takes only a few minutes. But the maturity process had been happening for years before that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you sure you know these questions or something? Because you've really like honed in on a lot of this. But honestly, I shouldn't be surprised. Every time we come together, it's like we able to read each other's books in a
Mm-hmm.
metaphorical sense. But
Right.
wow, um, speaking of a lot of that process as well as especially I know that book, the Freedom Artist that you spoke about so much, which I have a question later on down the line that you can dig deeper into it. But I wanted to ask, besides also that book, who are some of your other influences? Like if there's in another book or another poem and saying that
Mm-hmm.
was very profound to you that had an influence to what you also create.
Uh, we did the book study together with Octavia's thing,
Okay.
Octavia's series. That one helped me because I'm a child of war, and I didn't even wake up to that until last year. And now I studying my country's history, and I'm even more clear. I just realized a few weeks ago that we've had the longest running civil war in history
Wow.
in my country. Yeah. So it's not just a metaphor when I say I'm a child of war, even though I wasn't directly in the war zone, right? So there's that, and also the fact that, the government sees on my grandfather's ashes and things like that. I was afraid of loss. Like, there are two ways people respond to that. Some people respond by like holding tight and becoming greedy and like, making lots of money and saving it. But I responded the opposite extreme to that, where like I'm like, what's the point of making lots of money and saving when it can be taken away anytime? So I didn't, right?
Mm,
And but after reading that book, I realized I could always just keep rebuilding. You know, especially when you keep rebuilding community as well, when you have that support, that the rebuilding is easier, that I don't have to be so afraid of loss anymore. So there's that. But the other two, the ones concerning what I mentioned about the colonial mindset, right?
yeah.
Is when I talk about they don't even see us as alive, is the 12 golden pearls of power
Okay.
is one of them. And then I think I have it here. Oh yeah. I find it it's a shorter book and a better book than Robert Greene's book.
Oh, the
The
48 Laws of
48,
Power.
yeah.
Yeah.
because it's so much shorter and more like concise.
Yeah.
The 12 Golden Pearls of Power by Mustafa Arif. And then I learned more about the colonial programming from reading Rearming Hinduism by Professor Vamsi Jalari, Nature, Hindu Phobia, and the Return of Indian Intelligence. I learned another layer to not even seeing us as alive, right?
Mm.
Where I realized that the other side of that is that in every movie, in every song, every TV program that they create, it's the same program. Even in the nature documentaries,
Mm.
they will always make it look like uh, domination and systemic violence are just nature or just life
Yes.
because they want to justify the violence that they've done, right?
Yes.
They're like, oh, it's okay because it's just nature, it's just life. And another excuse they have is everyone does it. Yes, everyone has done it, but not to the scale that you have done it, colonizer you, right? It's a totally unprecedented scale.
Yeah.
And even in nature, the way they overemphasize, right? The way, let's say, a cheetah, chasing after a deer and attacking it, the way they dramatize and sensationalize, the way the cheetah kills the deer.
Yes.
When in reality, in nature, that might happen maybe once a day, twice a day at the most, right? Maybe even once a week in some cases, right? Because that deer can last a few days for the cheetah.
Yeah.
It can last quite some time. Uh, by the way, when I learned about the Samai indigenous people, they too have their, because they don't have refrigerators, right?
Yeah.
They tend to share a kill after they hunt, right? So they have a gift economy. And so what I learned from that is that because they want to justify that, they create this whole colonial program
Mm.
when in reality, there's another side to nature too, which is the gentle side, the one with harmony and oneness. In reality, everything in nature is interconnected.
Yes.
Now they're learning that even trees communicate with each other, that even a single tree is actually not a single tree, but interconnected with the fungi network under the roots that we don't see,
Yep.
right? It's literally every tree is like connected to every other tree in the whole world.
Yes.
The reality of nature, the real reality is interconnectedness, is oneness. It's not systemic violence. Yes, there can be a brutal side,
Yes.
but the way they overemphasize it is the problem, right? And by overemphasizing it, they also justify, for example, factory farming, right?
Hmm.
The same way they justify slavery by saying, all Africans also own slaves, even though chattel slavery is different from forced labor.
Yep.
They justify factory farming, right? And again, I'm not saying everyone should become vegan, even though I'm vegan too. What I'm saying is it's fine if you want to eat meat, but do it the way our ancestors did. Just hunt animals and only take what you need.
Yeah.
Not this overconsumption and
Yeah.
overkilling and overviolence that we're doing. So that's what I learned from this book. And because of that, how it influenced me is like at the time I was reading this, I was watching Amazon's A Wheel of Time,
Okay.
but I stopped after the third episode. I was like, this is way too much violence, right? And the way, even in the what do you call it, the rating systems in movies and TV shows, right?
Yeah.
PG-13 and X-rated and R-rated, you would notice that sex is more strictly monitored over violence. So we're exposed to
Oh
violence
yeah.
at a younger age than we're exposed to sexual intimacy,
Yeah.
right? And even when it comes to sexual intimacy, I've noticed it's so rare to find a movie that's not about forbidden sex as a theme. Right?
Hmm.
There's always some sort of like something sinister associated with it.
Yeah.
That's something I've noticed lately too. Hence why,
Mm.
and then even in porn is also kind of violent.
Oh yeah.
You have to really look for like uh, an intimacy that's nourishing and nurturing. For me, I've been looking at porn created by women now in order to do that. So very what they call soft porn,
Mm-hmm.
like or even erotic movies like created by women. Uh, and it's a deep dive search to find that even.
OnlyFans.
Yeah, OnlyFans.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
oh wow, man. I really want to also touch on a point that you spoke about again, and this is going to go back to that oneness, the
Mm-hmm,
connectedness, and the wholeness, which we'll speak on in a bit. Is for those who want to get in a visual example. If y'all have ever seen, if you watch, cartoons, if you were watching TV, have you ever seen the cartoon or animation of Avatar: The Last Airbender? There is
mm-hmm,
there is an episode where I think it's the first season or it might be second where they travel to a swamp
mm-hmm,
and literally as they're traveling through the swamp they end up coming across of course different individuals, different creatures, different people, and you
mm-hmm,
come to find this huge tree, this very huge tree. And later on, you come to find out that that's when Aang lost Appa, which was his flying bison, and he used that tree to search throughout the whole forest without nature and everywhere else to find that
mm-hmm,
link and connection back to Appa. So I just wanted to give that visual to folks because that's what you gave me as you were talking about that when you talked about how the tree
mm-hmm,
actually they do communicate. That's another form. It's because we don't know. We only see the surface level and we don't see the interconnectedness that's rooted underneath the surface because we speak
mm-hmm,
so much surface level. So I just wanted to share that because that's what I got from again you,
mm-hmm.
which going into my next
Yeah,
question, but go ahead.
plants can even count. By the way, I watched a YouTube video yesterday where plants not only communicate with each other, they can count.
Mm,
So the Venus flytrap, right, that closes its mouth, after an insect lands on it,
yes.
right? The thing is, it doesn't need uh, that many insects. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just like an extra thing that it does. That's why it eats insects. But like, and also it's also very rare for the insect to be able to land, and so there's so many factors involved. So it really needs to be very precise and make sure that the thing that lands on it is an insect
Mm,
and not something else, right? Needs to be really like careful
yes.
in the way. So timing is very important. So there's a scientist who did an experiment, and it's on the YouTube video where if you scratch the plant with a pencil once or twice, uh, it wouldn't close,
Mm,
which means it's counting. It's counting the number of the strokes,
yeah.
and only after a certain number of strokes with the pencil, it actually closes.
Wow.
So it's counting.
The more you know, y'all. And speaking of the more you know, next question I got for you to share to folks because you drop again a lot of knowledge, information,
Mhm.
wisdom, aka dropping gems all over the place. My question for you is how do you acquire a lot of knowledge? And I'll talk about the next question. So, can you give us an idea of how do you acquire so much of this knowledge?
Um, I guess the YouTube algorithm knows me now. Um, that's one level to it. Um, that's when the algorithm is a positive, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but also, I do watch a lot of documentaries and I read a lot of books, and I also am part of a lot of decolonial communities now,
Mm,
where we're very, and I sometimes ask them for book recommendations, like this one, Hinduism and Nature,
yeah.
came out of Hindus for Decolonizing group. I think even Rearming Hinduism also came from that group as well. And I even started a book club for that. And there are two YouTube videos that you can watch now where the book club discusses the book.
Mm,
And this will be part of the my decolonial Hinduism book club as well. I think it will be the third or fourth book in the series.
Okay.
And so being part of a community helps as well.
Okay.
And and so like one thing leads to another, right? Like a book like Hinduism and Nature, right, has already led me to two other books written by the same author, right? The Sacred Plants of Hinduism and Sacred Plant Animals in Hinduism, right? A book like Rearming Hinduism by Vamsi Jalari. There are, before I read that, I read his fiction first. I read his the Kishkinder Chronicles, which is probably going to be a trilogy. I read the first two,
Okay.
Saraswati's Intelligence and The Five Keepers of Jolapuram. And because I read the fiction, interestingly enough, when I read Rearming Hinduism, it helped me understand his nonfiction better and vice versa. And I
Mm.
was able to go back to his fiction. And I'm like, oh, I understand now why he wrote that plot, why he did it the way he did it. I get it now. He's trying to, like me, he's using storytelling to reprogram our minds from colonialism and
Yes.
see how destructive it is, and to see that indigenous cultures such as Hinduism were actually at the forefront of climate justice.
Yeah.
And that's why the attack against us is relentless. That's why Hindu phobia is relentless, but not just Hindu phobia, but also Dharma phobia and also anti-indigenousness in general,
Mm.
right? When I say Dharma phobia, I include anti-Buddhism, anti-Jainism, anti-Sikhism, because they're all part of the Dharma traditions of India.
Wow. Mm.
And we're 1 billion people, which means we're the largest group of indigenous people left in history that still have our uh, culture intact without being totally destroyed.
Mm.
That's why they're attacking us relentlessly. Because the other indigenous people, like some of them, they exist, but they're in smaller groups, like in the forests or things like that. And the people in the cities are more disconnected, right?
Yeah.
Although some of them are so connected, I don't want to generalize, right? But like we're like the largest single group.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you study it, we're at the forefront of climate justice. We're recreating, like there's going to be swallow loss by in 20 years. And we're fighting against that. Swallow loss is going to be the number one issue.
Mm.
Like the whole world could turn into desert by 2040, you know? And Hindus are actually literally regenerating forests and jungles the way they used to be, especially the indigenous women in India, the indigenous Hindus over there. And of course, Bill Gates is there. He's the one fighting against that and working in cahoots with Monsanto, which is now Bayer, of course, since Bayer bought Monsanto. But I mean, they're trying to patent seeds and create artificial seeds and wreak havoc. And so there's all of that agenda, right,
Yeah.
connected to all of this. We could have 10 cities, 10 major cities, including New Orleans, underwater by 2030. Things are
Mm.
very serious right now.
Yeah.
So that's part of why, as far as story for a cause, that other project, climate justice is my number one issue now as a Hindu.
Mm. Eh. Again, y'all. Now at least y'all have a method, or at least know how Kundan grabs and finds a lot of these resources, and again does in depth. This is, you need to go deeper into subjects, especially when you want to learn more about things. And on top of all of that, I
Yeah,
want to
it's not
know.
just about what I find.
Hmm.
That's another important thing to add. It's also about what I refuse to find or what I refuse to accept, right?
Mm.
Where, and that's also how I teach the algorithm, right? Speaking of the algorithm, yes, the algorithm is trying to program your behavior, but you can also program the algorithm
Yeah.
back, not just by what you find, but also what you refuse to find.
Hmm.
So for the last 2 years, I refused to read books by white authors, especially when it comes to spirituality,
Yeah.
and more lately when it comes to climate justice issues, especially white men. Like white women, I accept a little bit,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, and that is part of how I find things. So like negative space is as important as positive space, right? Where it's also about the space that you leave is as important as the space you create.
Some art for y'all right there. Some art concepts, man.
Yeah.
Negative in the spaces that it's not even there. That
Mhm.
also creates the part of that
Mhm.
art. Mm.
Mhm.
But on top, including how you again acquire all this knowledge, it's it's honestly, no, it's an amazing feat to me, especially for folks who acquire a lot of this knowledge, to have such a great recall and to not only at a moment's notice, but when it applies, to have it just ready, set to go. So I want to know, what do you do to retain and remember so many concepts, thoughts, and these words?
Mm. I think sky gazing, actually, shouldn't even call it sky gazing anymore. I used to call it that, but it's misleading because what it actually is I'm not even looking at the sky, I'm looking at the akash, or
Mm,
the 0 point field, the empty space between the, the sky and me, right? That increases my perception.
mm,
So it's both in Hindu practice and also in indigenous Buddhist practice as well. It's from both sides because I am trained to read somebody's Akash records, right? Which I did for you as well, right? That's
yes.
part of the justice-based holistic time management too. So that's part of it. But also, as I showed in my model of the types of unrecognized labor, right? The food I eat, right? Not just MCD oil, which is in coconut and avocados,
Mm,
but also nootropics, which, by the way, are very expensive. So
yeah.
uh, I don't take the nootropics on a monthly basis, but more like every 3 months when I get some extra income.
Yeah.
I do take there's my friend's company, Neurohacker Collective. They have a product called Quality of Mind.
Okay.
Uh, and there's a caffeine-free version and also one with caffeine.
Yes.
Uh, I've discovered recently that I don't even need to take the full dose, especially with the one that contains caffeine.
Yes.
So the full dose is like, I think you take 7 pills per day. Now I only take 2 per day, which also saves me money now. And I just take, yeah, occasionally I might take 3 per day.
Yeah.
But that also helps. And even that is part of my family tradition, right? In a way, although now it's slightly westernized or modernized, right? Because when I was younger, uh, my mom and dad would make me almond milk.
Yeah.
They would crush the almond and feed it to me with milk and sugar, right? Until the milk and yeah, I think a little bit of sugar.
Hmm.
And because they believe the almonds help with the brain as well.
Because of also how
So,
the shape and how it
mm,
looks.
right. And that might contain MCD oil as well. I'll have to check. Uh, and so the lineage, the tradition of emphasizing brain food,
Mm,
I grew up with since my teenage years for 30, 40 years, right? I was raised with that concept of like, you need food not just for your body, but for your brain, specifically for the brain itself,
mm,
right? So, yeah, so besides spiritual practices like sky gazing, which can expand your memory and perception and creativity, it's also your lifestyle, your diet, your nutrition, even some practices like sunlight differential, which help us sleep, right?
mm.
And cortisol differential, which also help us sleep, right? So sunlight differential is giving yourself 30 minutes of outdoor sunlight in the morning, and conversely, turning off blue light at night
Yeah.
and turning off the blinds. And preferably just turn off your devices at least an hour before bedtime, not just the blue light, but just turn it off,
Yeah.
right? Because it segues into the cortisol differential, right?
Mm,
Cortisol is supposed to be high in the morning and low
low
at
at night.
night, right?
Hmm.
But for some people, it's reverse. It's low in the morning and high at night. And for us racialized people, because we get stopped by cops and things like that, uh, also a dog suddenly attacking you, um, our cortisols are like high all the time. So we need to reverse that process as well.
Yes.
And part of that is to, in the morning, do some light exercise, maybe some dance, and then at night, turning off devices and doing something relaxing, like uh, looking at a candle flame, listening to my Hindu mantra, my Buddhist mantra, uh, reading a book, uh, reading a physical book,
Yeah.
actual physical book,
Yeah.
right? Uh, but preferably maybe reading nonfiction because sometimes fiction can also raise the cortisol, especially with the cliffhangers, right? Uh, yeah, so, yeah, doing something really relaxing at night, maybe even like, massaging yourself, things like that can, because good sleep, restorative sleep can also help with your brain function, your memory function,
Yes.
things like that. Yeah.
Wow, that was definitely a lot of great
Hmm.
information. Some of it, it just goes to show y'all how important, again, not only
Again,
the quality of
holistic,
foods,
right? Yeah.
yes, not only
Yeah.
the quality of foods that you eat for your body, but also for your brain, those brain foods, as well as your rituals, your routines, and your practices that help to improve upon all of that to create that quote unquote wholeness.
Hmm.
Oh man, I love it. Before we get into talking about the diagram and getting more into
Hmm.
the consulting and all the other, business aspects that you do have,
Hmm.
I'm gonna switch over to what I like to call my segment of fun questions. So
Hmm.
we're gonna do a few of those and then we'll make our way back and we are getting close to the ends of this interview. But again, for any of y'all that are still in here, please, if y'all have any questions that you would like to share and ask Kundan, please throw them down in the comments. I am here. Kundan is here. And if you have any things that you want to know, because again, it's a wealth of knowledge here, take a stab at it. Go ahead. I should say take a stab at it, but please, please add those comments there and those questions. So with that, with these fun questions as well, all of y'all can answer these too in here on in the comments. Even after, if you're watching this on Instagram or YouTube, all those people back over there, y'all can put down your answers in the comments and join along. But here we go.
Hmm.
So the first one I always like to do is a would you rather. This one was kind of funny for me to put together, but it's cool. So, would you rather enter places, enter places saying your name aloud every time and have to explain why you say it, or enter places doing cartwheels and laugh about it?
Well, on a practical level, because of the birth trauma and the way my body is and things like that, I don't think I could do cartwheels even if I wanted to. So it would probably be the first, just because on a practical level.
Mm. If say in this particular case that wasn't even again
Mm,
a hurdle for that to be there, um, would that change or influence
mm.
your thought on it?
Yeah, I think I would still probably say my name just because uh, people, mispronounce it all the time.
Yeah,
Uh, and
I know I am
it's,
guilty of doing that a number of times.
right. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's different when you do it, right? It's a different context when a white person does it, right?
Yeah.
It's I was just watching a reel where so many people were mispronouncing the Supreme Court nominee,
Hmm.
right? Biden Supreme Court. I'm like, oh my God, they're doing it even to a Supreme Court nominee. Imagine what they do to us, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so that's more of the racism aspect of it as well, right?
Mm,
But but yeah, it's in order to like reassert my aliveness, like I said earlier, right? I would probably do more of like just although the cartwheel can also help me reassert my aliveness as well, but more on a identity basis,
yeah.
just saying my name and like insisting people pronounce it right would be like I think the option.
Hmm. Okay. So every
Mhm.
door that you go through, whether if it's you going to the restroom, you going into the next classroom, or you just walking through into the airport, wherever you're going, say your name aloud and you're going to explain it. I'm with it.
Mhm.
All right. Next one I got for you. This one is finish this line. So you create whatever you want from it. It's so much easier to.
Oh, just finish the sentence. Oh, it's not multiple choice. Okay, I
No, there's
see.
no multiple. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's no multiple choice. So you just just finish. Yeah, just finish. I
Oh,
should call it that. Finish this and then this sentence. Then
okay. It's so much easier to. It's so much easier to be dead or act like a dying being in a colonial oppressive system that doesn't even see us as alive. Unless we flip that and reassert and reclaim our aliveness, then it's actually so much easier to be alive.
mm, mm. See, I saw the eyes and everything working, y'all, as they was going. I knew it was gonna be something just is deep on y'all right there. That was great. That was great. Um, next
I
thing I got.
mean,
Next thing I got for you. And shouts out to one of my coworkers. Shouts out to you, Alex, for this. Is a question, which is, what is there more of in the world? Doors or wheels?
oh yeah, I saw that in the Facebook group, in the Encanto ship posting group or
Yeah,
Casita posting group. Doors or wheels, yeah. That's
it's interesting.
that's that's interesting. That's debatable. But some people say there's more. I think some people say there's still more doors because even cars have doors, even though they have wheels. So
Yeah,
even things with wheels have doors.
exactly.
Uh, but on the other hand, if you count the doorknob as a wheel, uh, then there are more wheels than doors. Yeah.
I'm actually the contrary. My thought was behind that folks would think that there's more wheels than doors. So I, of course, in my own, I said it is my own biased way was like I chose the doors because we can talk about what different doors, spiritual doors, metaphysical. Like I was going
Mm.
way beyond again, because again, if we're talking about my coworker also said that even car wheels count as wheels. So you got like all of the different Hot Wheels and all of those different sorts of model cars, and they have wheels. So
All the
those
little
wheels,
gears inside the cars, right? Yeah,
all of those different
yeah.
anything that you would
Mm.
characterize or define as a wheel would end up counting. So for me, it was like, yeah, I mean, you even think of tire factories, you think of going to the mechanic and they have all those extra tires and stuff that's just piled up over in their complexes. Like those wheels also count too. So for me, it was like people would say wheels for sure, but I would biasly end up still saying doors because I like to add the spiritual aspect to it. But
Mm. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. Hey, again, like you said, it's debatable.
But even
Whatever.
spiritually, right? If you see our Hindu and Buddhist chakras, right? You know, people say there are seven, but it depends on what system you use, right? In our indigenous Buddhist system, there's actually five, right?
Yeah.
Five, and but those are the major ones. There are also these like tiny little chakras all over the body. There's probably millions
Mm.
of them. These little nodes that are turning. So even spiritual, it's kind of debatable. So
Again, whatever applies, because this is a question that again is just
yeah.
intriguing to just have out there
Mm-hmm.
as just again a conversation to talk about. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Last one that I got for you for these fun questions. Well, again, they're fun to me. I don't know if they're fun to anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a scenario for you. So, if you had only a day to organize an event and gather people to help and or come to the event, what would that event be about and who would
Mm-hmm.
you invite?
Mm-hmm.
Because if y'all don't know, Kundan has
Mm-hmm.
done a lot of workshops, done a lot of events that were self-produced and just getting the word out, creating flyers, number of different things. So,
Yeah, I've done a lot of workshops and recently the poetry book clubs, but like if money was no object, right, I feel like I
mm-hmm.
would do more of the multimedia storytelling concerts because I don't
Mm,
know, some people might not know this. I think you know this. I also, because I'm multi-creative, some people, a lot of people only know of my, my dancing and my stories and my poem,
yeah.
but I also do what I call light art or art with light, where I make light move in very interesting ways using this type of cloth
Mm,
with LED lights, and I put the LED lights in a cup. And when you put it in the cup, it shapes the light in a certain way.
yes.
And then when you put this on top and when you move it around, the light moves and really, and then if you put multiple layers of different colors, it moves in very like interesting ways. And then when you add uh, smoke,
Mm,
it adds another layer. Like you can shape light in very interesting ways that are like, yeah, just beautiful. And so now of course I just do it in my room and it's a very small version, but I've often thought about what would it really like
yeah.
to do something like that on a big scale, like a concert stage, right? Or a stadium, like a Super
Yes.
Bowl stadium,
Mm,
and tell a story that is like anti-colonial or anti-gaslighting, and make like an entire light show and then add some of my animations into it. It would be like pretty crazy amazing. So I would probably do
wow.
that and maybe even have like a workshop be part of it somehow.
Wow. Y'all, it's confirmed. Gundin is a light bender. It's confirmed.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a grand, you know, thought event and
Hmm.
whole visual to have. That's really dope. I knew a little bit about the lights, but I didn't know in depth, so or a little bit
Yeah.
more context behind it. So that was that was that
Right.
was
Do I
really
have
nice to
the?
know. Oh, we can
I
wait.
think the battery is down, but this is one of the LED lights that I
Okay.
have that I use for it. And then this, so I put it right here. So this is what I mean by multiple layers, right?
Mm,
If you put the LED light underneath it, then I use this cup, these teacups, right? Or this
yes.
teacup. And if you put the light inside it, and then you put this right here with
Yes.
the light inside it, even just a teacup alone shapes the light in a really beautiful, interesting way where the light takes on the shape of the cup.
Mm,
So if you have a different shape cup, it would have a different shape,
Yeah.
right? So multiple cups with different shapes alone can also, yeah, bend light in interesting ways, which by the way, even touches on, quantum physics and spirituality because, I now also move light into water. I've done that too
Yeah,
very
I know. I was about
recently.
to.
Yeah, because I noticed, and I discovered this accidentally when I was doing one of my rituals where if you, so I have this candle with this interesting design, right?
Yes.
And if you move the light through a small water cup with water inside it,
Mm-hmm.
it forms the reflection of the light
Yeah.
forms an interesting circle of light onto the surface below, and you can even move it around and make it move like a wheel.
The wheels come back, but okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a manual analog animation that you're creating, basically,
Mm.
and that goes into physics because the reflection of light, right? Like in water, light slows down and it
Yes.
bends, right?
Yes.
And it apparently takes the fastest route, right? And you would think that the fastest route is actually the shortest route, but because light slows down in water,
Yeah.
sometimes it looks longer,
Mm.
right? And what's fascinating about that is that I think this is called Fermat's theorem of least time. It's almost as if the light knows before it even reaches its destination the path it should take or it would take in order to be the fastest. Almost like light has its own
He's this.
consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a book on that. It was like black light, dark consciousness
Mhm.
of that's the same thing with like I'm glad you brought
Have
up
you
the
seen the
water
movie
too.
Arrival? The science
Arrival?
fiction movie Arrival
No, I have not.
with Amy Adams. So it's based on a short story by Ted Chiang.
Hmm.
So the thing about light, I don't think is in the movie. I think he took it out.
Books on
But if
books.
you read the original story, there's a section where he explains how the aliens are able to uh, have this interesting form of language where time doesn't matter, where learning the language alone
Yeah.
allows you to see the future or go back into the past. And one of the ways they explain it in the original story is by showing how light does it as an example.
Mm.
So yeah,
Wow. Again, y'all taking y'all notes. Hopefully, y'all taking y'all notes. Anything that's captured your attention
it's
and
called
your
the
ideas.
original story is based on it's called The Story of Your Life in the short story collection Stories of Your Life by Ted Chiang.
Okay.
And all the other stories in the book are amazing. I highly recommend every story in here because it is also the book where I learned about lookism, which is one of the biases that not often talked about, where
Yeah.
even if a person is taller, people
Mm.
automatically assume that taller people are smarter or even kinder. That's a lookism bias. So
Boom.
there is a story in here called Liking What You See, a documentary, and it's a story told in the form of a documentary, right? So, which means that story can also be adapted into a movie because of the way he tells it,
Mm.
where the premise is what if you can turn off the ability biologically to turn off the ability to see someone as attractive? How would society change? That was his premise of the story.
Mm.
So it's a very fascinating story to read. A thought experiment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yep. I'm already done found the book. Let's go. All right.
Yeah.
Again, y'all. If something catches your eye, catches your ear, please. If not, again, reach out to Kundan. More questions. Join. Follow. You'll find more and more information as it goes. Because now we're gonna move into the part talking about not only not your just your consulting and your creativity and your creation, but also a
Mhm.
little bit more about the whole justice base and specifically about your wholeness diagram. So can you tell us a bit
Mhm.
more in depth? I know you got to do a post about it about your
Mhm.
diagram and your services.
Hmm. Yeah, I created a diagram and this whole model and methodology and point of view because I've noticed that, especially recently, clients have that come to me over and over have the same problem, right? Or the same challenge.
Mm,
And at first it seems like they're different challenges, but it's like the same thing. Like they would often come to me with two challenges. Like they would come to me with one challenge, right? But when I dig deeper, like there would be the second challenge.
hmm.
Or it would be the other way around. That sometimes they would come with me with the second challenge, and then when I dig deeper, the first challenge would also be uncovered, right? So I noticed this intersection between relationship boundaries being constantly violated and the lack of career clarity or other like time management issues where they're constantly procrastinating, for example.
Wow.
So I started noticing that interplay, right? There's an intersection between the two. So I'm realizing that that's my niche where I'm really supposed to help people who have that challenge where the two are intersecting and they might not even know that the two are intersecting, right?
Mm,
So they might come to me with one or the other. And then because I've worked with so many people like that, now I'm like, oh, the other side needs to be uncovered too. Like I kind of, already, uh, like the right diagnosis
yes.
is half the solution in a way, like seeing the problem for what it is clearly is as
Mm,
important as showing the solution. And so that's why I came up with the diagram. It's more about the clarity on the problem rather than a solution, right? Because there's like a perspective shift, right? Or a thought reversal
hmm.
where they might think it's one thing, but it's actually a little deeper. So, like, they might come to me with a boundary issue or a clarity issue, but they all intersect with the wholeness issue that I expressed earlier
Yeah.
with not feeling alive and not feeling whole and not feeling enough, right? But because it's a cycle, as I explained in my post, you can start anywhere, right? And be able to get to the other two.
Mm,
Like if you start from reclaiming your boundaries, eventually you will rediscover your wholeness. And the more you get in touch with your wholeness, the more clear you get because here's the thing, the opposite of clarity isn't so much confusion, but it is a narrowness of perspective.
hmm.
So when you widen the perspective into wholeness, out of that tunnel vision, that's when you get clear. And when you get clear, you see all the boundary violations that were violated. You see that as part of clarity as well. You're able to reclaim that. And then that reinforces your wholeness, right?
Mm,
Likewise, if you reclaim your boundaries, then you're able to reconnect your wholeness and then get into clarity. Or if you hire a coach or consultant like me to get clear,
yes.
say on your career clarity so that you can feel significant again. And I show that, hey, part of the reason why you're not feeling significant and not getting clear is because there is an agenda around you, a systemic agenda to make sure you're not clear by constantly
Mm,
gaslighting you and hence constantly violating your boundaries because gaslighting is both an attack on your clarity
yeah.
and also an attack on your boundaries simultaneously. So that's the intersection, right?
Mm, yeah.
So once you reclaim clarity and boundaries, you also again reclaim wholeness.
I love it. And that's that diagram again for folks to see and know in particular. Again, if you want to check it out, just go on and follow Kundan. and you'll see there's a post with that diagram. I can't really show you the diagram here, again, because it might look a little fuzzy, if not a little
Yeah.
different, you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, um, okay, I think everything, like, yeah, I still see you, but now you've done frozen on my screen.
All right, you were frozen for a bit, and then now you're back.
Okay, am I moving at least?
Yeah, you're moving. Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully people can see you because I cannot see you anymore, but it's all good. Um,
Okay.
from putting that all together, I wanted to also add and ask a question from that diagram, and you may have said it and spoken on it, but just so it's straightforward to the people listening, is what is the main message you want to give to your listeners to get to know about this particular diagram? What's the main message?
It's that if you wanna, so either if your issue is related to time management issues,
Mm-hmm.
right, such as career clarity or ending procrastination, things like that, or even creative blocks like writer's block and things like that, um, that consider that the lack of clarity, right,
Yes.
might also be coming from some sort of relationship boundary issues, right?
Mm.
And conversely, if you have some sort of insecurity issue, right, like not feeling confident, right, about anything,
Yeah.
and then you have these relationship boundary issues as a result, consider the fact that it may be also impacting your career clarity, and that it's not the main thing I want people to learn from all this though is that the both end, right? That is really not your fault that you're not clear or that you're not feeling whole or that
Mm.
you have these boundary validation experiences, that it's a systemic issue, a communal issue, that the system needs to change, that the burden shouldn't be on the individual alone.
Yeah.
And at the same time, individuals who cause harm and who perpetuate the system, right, by causing harm, they're still held accountable, right?
Mm.
And they still should be held accountable. And that people who cause harm are not necessarily good people or bad people. They're just people, period,
Yes.
who have caused harm. And whether you see them as a good person or bad person, that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
But don't allow yourself to be gaslit into into allowing that or enabling that by thinking, oh, he's a good person, right? He still causes harm.
Yeah.
The person does. So they still need to be held accountable for that.
Mm.
But also the consequences needs to be what's the word I'm using? Needs to match the so-called crime,
Yeah.
right? I don't even want to use the word crime because, again, we still live in a very colonial rewards and punishment
The
system, right?
incident.
Where it's not right, the incident, yeah. It's not a true justice system that we have, right? Where we overly punish the wrong people and then we overly reward people just because they have systemic power, like with the, Brock Turner incident, right, where he got only 3 months for the sexual assault. Conversely, like the four black boys who didn't even commit the crime,
Mm-hmm.
the Central Park Four,
Yep.
right,
Yep. Exactly.
got like 30 years. And that's what happens when in a system that's disconnected from wholeness deliberately, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring it all up is because, there are people in the world who, for many reasons, don't want to, report what happened to them, including me. I didn't report,
Yeah.
right, to the cops. It didn't even occur to me to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 year after Me Too, there was a hashtag called Why I Didn't Report It, right?
Mm.
And I read, Chanel Miller's book, Know My Name, about the Brock Turner
Yeah.
thing, right? And how horrendous this legal process is, right? That's one of the reasons why people don't report it, how it's almost like the victim is the one on trial rather than the perpetrator. And also the embarrassment that they have to go through, right? Where, you know, part of the trial is they take really intimate pictures of you after you get raped or assaulted, uh, really close up, and the trial, the pictures are just blown up on the big screen,
Yeah.
and people are shown, the person's labia and their asshole and all of these things, really intimate. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing. That alone, right? That part alone. So there's that aspect, but the other aspect is I feel like people don't report it because they don't want to see somebody as a bad person. They're like, oh, he's a good person, even though he did this to me. And I really had to like help somebody with that recently and be like, well, there's no such thing as a good or a bad person. Like, I'm not a good person. Like, I can say that straight up without any, like, it's not from a lack of self-esteem or self-respect. It's just, to me, it's just matter of fact. Like, I come from wholeness when I say that.
Yes.
I say that I'm not a good person. I'm a mixture of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
A mixture of harmful programming that I probably don't even recognize, that I have to deprogram more and more every
Yeah.
day. And I'm also a mixture of all of this wisdom that you've heard,
Yes.
right? I also have my kind side. I have all of this. That makes me human.
Mm.
We have to me, reclaiming of wholeness is just a reclaiming of our humanity. That's all it is. And like,
Mm.
that's the number one thing that I want people to hear. Like, reclaim your aliveness, reclaim your humanity. That's what wholeness actually is about. Let's stop being in this constant pendulum between the demon and the angel, or the not enough and too much, or the perfect victim and the irredeemable uh, perpetrator. I have a diagram on that as
Oh
well that
yeah.
you can look
All
up
of yep.
on my profile. Yeah. So yeah, reclaim your humanity, reclaim your wholeness.
Hmm. Beautiful. And again, you must know these questions because you already done hit like two of them already on top of already doing that. So I got two more
Mm-hmm.
questions left for you, Kundan, and we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
end this interview. But before I do that, I want to take this time again, like I always do, because I have to appreciate you so much for your time and for you being
Mm-hmm.
present and always sharing your perspective and, like I said, the knowledge and wisdom that you
Mm-hmm.
passed down. So I'm grateful for your time and thank you again for reaching out so that we can do this interview at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're
thank you and your
welcome.
flowers to you. Um, and thank you to everybody who's
Can I
been here.
share the poem I was talking about before you do the last two
Oh yeah, of
questions?
course. Yes, you can.
Yeah. So there's the one where I talk about the denying of our aliveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the hypocrisy that results from that. So it's called mythologize. This is a made-up word that I made up from the noun mythology,
Yep.
right? So I turned it into a verb. It's called mythologized. Mythologized by Kundan Chhabra. Mythologized, surrounded by cruel stones from ancient petrified minds, only able to see themselves as saviors while they see the village people as villains and demon-possessed, not human.
Hmm.
Thou shalt not kill is their own law, but hey, zombies are already dead, right? So it's okay to destroy them if they're already dead, right? So it's not actually killing, right?
Hmm.
In their mental gym, their ferocious, agile, vicious acrobats have already pinned me in their cage of fiction, already molded, tied up. The only thing that scares them is the mirror of truth,
Hmm.
from which shoots out arrows of clarity. That's why. That's why they wear white hoods or navy blue suits or other disguises to cover themselves, as they can't stand nudity in any form.
Hmm.
But by doing all this, they too, they too have caged themselves, stripped of all color and spices, becoming more bland every day, a shrivel of who they once were.
Hmm.
That's why, that's why colorful, spicy truth, wholeness, and clarity triumphs in the end.
Yes, y'all. Man, again, not only the way that you weave words together, but the visuals. You already know. I always got to say you are honestly at this point to me, you're a master storyteller. It's very present in not only your art but in just the style of how you bring forth your information,
Mhm,
as well as yeah, you trying to dig in. You was digging into a few of the senses, like like just by just using very
mhm,
descriptive words. But thank you for sharing that. Thank you. See all
mhm.
them hearts
Yeah.
popping up. Yes, y'all. Give the love to Kundan. Give the love. So that's what's up. Because I was gonna say towards the end, but hey, you gave this to us right then and there. So I'm grateful for that. Um, as you're getting your drink, I mean, again, I can't visually see you, but I can again feel this moment that we're in. My last two questions for you. Then after that, we'll wrap up. You give again your spill and where everyone can find you and all of that, promotion
Mhm,
purposes stuff. So before you do that, next question I have for you, it's a future question, and I know it's a very
mhm,
general question, but just so you can get people to up and up of what you wanted to see. Um, where do you see yourself in the next few years?
mhm. Yeah, I see. I do have, different dreams that I have. I do want to go eventually beyond the coaching and consulting business, eventually
Mm-hmm.
into more of the inventor, artist, activist,
Mm.
because I have at least, two apps that I want to create, one for creatives
Yes.
to, yeah, to be able to apply some of the principles that I teach, but without my physical presence. Like the sky gazing thing, where if we can kind of do a version of that in the app, uh,
Yeah.
and the two ways of creative expression that I talked about earlier,
Okay.
I feel like because of that, I don't have any more writer's block or creative blocks, because I feel like what we think of as a blog is really just a delay, right?
Yes.
Especially with the first kind, where uh, taking a break on purpose and coming back later can actually help, especially if you do it deliberately on purpose as part of your process,
Yes.
right? Um, so yeah, that can be, I feel like, incorporated into an app. So yeah, and then combine that with social media, where what if they can share their work with each other.
Mm.
So I have that, and then of course the concert that I'm talking about, things like that, like, and really have like, and that's why in my art, you express how my stuff is visual, right? Even my poetry
Yes.
now is very visual. That's deliberate, and even when I draw, right,
Mm.
I think several steps ahead.
Yes.
Even when I draw and paint, I paint in a way that to make sure that is photographable and animatable,
Mm.
meaning that it would, first of all, look good in a photograph, and second of all, my intention is eventually to be able to animate that photograph into these animation loops that I do, right?
Yes.
So I feel like everything that I do now is like has several levels to it where it should look good on its own, like a seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
The seed should look good as a seed or be as powerful as a seed. But when you multiply it into a tree and a forest,
Mm.
it should still be as powerful, if not more. It becomes another layer to
Yes.
it. So that's the way I operate now with my art. So the future is very much part of the present for me already, right? So I'm saying all this because my intention eventually is some of my stories become like children's books and even animated shorts or
Wow.
feature length movies, and eventually this animation concept that I talked about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see that happening where I'm still gonna be first and foremost a teacher,
Yes.
but I'm gonna teach in more and more like uh, grand ways.
Mm.
That's how I see it. Like,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
mhm.
And with that, the last question I got for you is always the ending question. I have to always keep saying it. Shouts out to Busy Balboa for the inspiration around this. The last question I have for
Mm,
you is when it comes to your life, challenges, stories,
mm,
just in general, your world and experiences, environment around you, is it the quality or the quantity?
mm. Wait, in what context?
Again, it's however you want to describe it, but I have an idea maybe where you will go with it, but again, it's wherever you want to describe it. It's open.
I think there's a both and aspect to even that, right? I know because it's debatable. I know people like Gary Vee would say, uh, or even George Cow, whom I interviewed recently, they would say like they say document, don't create, right? Meaning
Mm,
you, if you carefully document everything you
yeah.
create, you can repurpose them, or like me, you can add layers to it, like photography, animated, right?
Yes.
And then animate, and then combine it with your poetry or your story, and with some music, you have basically an animated story,
Yes.
which I already have a 2 minute animated story, by the way, where every single aspect of that video
Mm-hmm.
is my own original piece, like
Mm,
the animation, the music, the story, all of it is me, right? And it's 2 minutes, right?
yes.
So in that sense, it is quantity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I differ from people like George Carroll and Gary Vee in the sense that you have to be strategic about it if you go that route where
Hmm.
I feel like you do have to care about quality to a certain extent,
Yes.
but not be perfectionist,
Agreed.
where you, as long as you're creating quantity with the idea that in the future you're able to combine them in different ways, you do the quantity in a way that you can either repurpose it or you can combine them in more creative ways or more interesting ways. If you do it that
Yeah.
way, then it's quantity over quality.
Mm,
Yeah.
there it is, y'all. But with that, again, thank you so much, Kundan, for coming through and being a part of more interviews series. I'm so
Mhm.
grateful and so glad that I got to do so. There's so much more I did get to learn, and if not, I can always go back and still reference this as well as appreciate your
Hmm.
time, because again, that's always something that's very valuable to me, that when people give up their time, that shows a lot about them as the person, as well as, the respect and, support.
Hmm.
So always thank you so much for your time and your presence. And
Yeah.
with that, y'all, before we do leave too, um Kundan, please again plug all of your ads and where people can find you and courses, etc.
Yeah. So I have a Patreon that you can find the link in my bio. And you can start for as little as $6 a month, right? All the way to like 555 a month. And the reward levels start at 28. And and by the way, the 555 is because I do have a show called Pioneering Perspectives,
Mm,
and it's it's kind of been on hiatus for a while because I have a goal of paying my guests, you know,
mm,
eventually a certain amount because, especially because of the diagram that I created,
yeah,
right? I feel like I have to live what I say. So I don't always want to do like, yeah, bring on guests and have them, yeah, have them not do it for free. And so an alternative that I've thought about is when I do bring on guests and do shows like this, I'm going to just ask the viewer to like, I ask the guest to just drop their Venmo and, and ask the viewers perhaps to send
support
something
and
if they want
donate.
to,
Yeah.
right? Right. So speaking of which, my Venmo is Kundan Chhabra. It's basically my name with a dash in between.
Mm,
If anybody else wants to do that. And besides that, on my YouTube channel, there is like over 300 videos you can watch for free. On my Medium, there's over 200 articles you can read for free. Uh, So I already have provided so much free content already.
yes.
So that's why I have a Patreon where if you want to support what I have already created and continue to create, by the way,
Yes.
since I keep doing these updates, right? Like my recent diagram is an update on the 7 types of labor that I had, right?
Mm,
So yeah, so there's my Patreon, there's my Venmo, and then there's my 2 pages now. Besides my main page, there is Clear Focus 7 that you can follow where you can learn things about clarity and focus. There is Story for a Cause, where I teach storytelling, how to tell good stories. As you know,
yes.
as you said, I'm a good storyteller. So now I want to teach others how to do that.
Yes.
And eventually, of course, I'll be launching paid courses on that as well,
Mm,
where people can pay for that. On the Instagram page, you will just get these little, snippets of insight, right?
yes.
The value in just paying for a course is you get organizational sequential learning,
Yeah.
right? Where you learn systematically rather than in bits and pieces, right?
Yes.
So that's why you would want to pay for a course, even though you can learn for free or low cost from so many sources like YouTube videos and books and things like
You get
that.
the whole
So that story
story.
for a course, you get the whole story, exactly, and not just episodes.
Mm,
Yeah. So that story for a cause. Then there is justice-based holistic time management, which is based on my Akashic records, based on your Akashic records that I give readings, as well as everything that I mentioned during this live. And right now it's a one-on-one program, starting with you should get at least 2 minimum sessions, followed by if you choose to continue, then 10 consecutive sessions at least
yes.
is what I recommend. And even with that, I include my knowledge of systems into it because the pricing for racialized and non-racialized people is different now
Yeah.
because of my understanding of inflation. I feel like in the coaching industry, for example, people keep raising prices
Yes.
because apparently you should get paid what you're worth or whatever they call it nowadays. And I feel like that perpetuates a larger inflation that we're going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do now, even with the pricing, is that for racialized people, after the first 2 sessions, I would actually decrease the price for them. And for non-racialized people, meaning white people, the price would increase after the first two sessions and it would just jump, you
Mm.
know, jump really high. And I price it on that level in that way to make it fair, right?
Mm.
While also being aware that I gotta eat too, so I cannot have my pricing be way too low,
Yeah.
you know, because that's another issue that I've had in the past because of systemic oppression. I felt like I needed to take care of other people's needs more than my own, when in reality it should be reciprocal,
Yep.
right? When it should go both
Yeah.
ways.
Reciprocal.
And so yeah, and for that reason, I also have options where people can provide scholarships as well, especially non-racialized white people can provide scholarships towards, discussion for racialized people. So eventually I want to be able to do that as well. So I'm bringing this up because I'm now trying to be very judicious and careful in every aspect of how I do my business.
Yeah.
And that's one example of where even in the pricing structure now, that awareness is included. So when you get my sessions, you're getting things at a very deep, multiple level kind of awareness, when you're getting my
Mm.
sessions, in addition to your Akashic records.
There it is, y'all. All here. Wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Reclaim it. But with that, again, thank you, Kundan. Thank you so much for being here, sharing all of that. Again, y'all go
Mm-hmm.
follow, subscribe, Kundan, YouTube, Instagram. I'll have a lot of this linked later, as well as this video will be up, and this interview will be up on YouTube within a few days, if not to a week. So if any of those want to watch the playback, you can do it on Instagram as well as on YouTube. But with that, y'all, this has been another installment, an episode of More Interviews, aka Memoirs of Our Real Experiences. And to leave out with y'all, remember to continue to write your memoirs, your story, and experiences to keep growing and sharing your life. But with that, this interview is done and out. From A.D.V.I.S.S and
Yep.
Kundan, we will see y'all for more interviews in the future to come. Peace and love. We're out.
Peace and love.
We're out.